second guess myself. I'm so used to, like the autocorrect now. I feel like
Yes,
my spelling is terrible because I'm so used to that.
I have the same issue. I can't spell
You
as
know,
well.
someone, I think it was the last time we did a live stream together, somebody said in the comments that there was this way that we started the live stream really conversationally, and she was upset on behalf of the guest that it felt like I was hitting record in the middle of a personal conversation and you didn't know when we started recording. And so I responded, and then she responded back. It was like nice. It was a nice little
Oh,
exchange, but I was like, no, I just
no.
don't know exactly when it starts going live. We
Right.
always
So we
talk
just,
about it beforehand.
yeah.
It's
And we're ready.
the
Yes.
first couple of times I thought I knew, because it says this meeting is being live streamed. After I
Yes.
have to press a button, write
Yes.
something, and then press another button. It's this whole dialogue series, and then but it doesn't start right when it tells you it starts. It like cuts in
Right.
at a weird place.
Right. Yes. Well, thanks for looking out to the,
Yeah.
the group that's
I
watching.
know, it was very sweet.
And also, yes, we're good. I
Yeah,
think what we were talking about though, as our potential topic for today would be fantastic because I have some interesting thoughts about that. There's some interesting thoughts I have about this kind of sex positivity movement and how that in and of itself has become intertwined with things like porn,
hmm,
with transgender, with the non-binary. It's all of this kind of entanglement. So I don't know
hmm,
if we're going to be able to untangle and unravel all of it today,
yeah.
but I think it's an interesting place to explore.
I agree. I think that there's an awful lot. I mean, the question seems to come back to how we think about sex,
Correct.
how we think
Correct.
about what our sexual morality and what our conception of, even the word conception, right? The word,
Yes.
like, what is human sexual behavior, supposed to be? We have
Yes.
you have to tread carefully around supposed tos and shoulds, but still, like,
Yes.
how do we even, what's our basis, our foundation?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. And it's
Hmm.
interesting because when I was a graduate student in my human sexuality class, I actually did my presentation on how pornography can be introduced or used in a relationship or introduced into a relationship to enhance
Oh,
their
interesting.
sexual experience with each
Hmm.
other. Now, when I was in graduate school, that was, I don't know, 15 years, more than that, probably 18 years ago, 19 years ago. So I as a person have completely, I mean, I not complete, well, I've changed as a person. It's been 20 years almost.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
the way that I look at things is quite different. But I was very pleased that people were talking about those things at that time and that it was okay to talk about porn in that way,
Hmm.
that it was okay to talk about, prostitution that's not um child trafficking, that's
Hmm.
consensual, that's adult, that between two consenting adults, and that does not involve children trafficking, all of the things that are just obviously horrific and disgusting. And so I appreciated that there was some kind of dialogue that started about that, but where I felt the conversation went, or where the sex positivity movement went into these kind of darker places now, where we are now, where it's sort of like the baby gets thrown out with the bathwater altogether.
Hmm.
So fetishism and things like of that nature, you're either sex positive and you're okay with that, or and then that puts you in the pedophile category potentially,
Hmm.
or you're not okay with that and you're closed-minded, or maybe in some way not allowing people to explore their sexuality between two consenting adults in a positive, consenting fashion.
Hmm.
So that,
Christine, and
go
I
ahead.
just want to hit pause really quick because somebody in the chat says no sound. Is there no sound
Oh,
for other people? Can just put in the chat if you can hear us. If you can't hear us, I want to make sure we're not just mime streaming. So If you can't hear us, we can close the stream and start up again. I can hear Christine fine and she can hear me. So let us know if you can hear. I just want somebody to confirm if you can. But until we get some confirmation of that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just one person saying no sound. So yeah, it's really interesting. So you guys can hear us. Thank you so much. Thanks for the confirmation, Ash and Evan and Calm on Ground. Thank you very much. So you had, at that point, you were glad that you were able to enter into a dialogue around these things, and so but over time your thoughts about it have evolved.
My thoughts about it have evolved, I think, over time. Yes. But I think more so than even just my thoughts evolving, I think that what started to happen is everything is getting lumped into one kind of category that doesn't leave room for the nuance again. And it doesn't leave room for people to have the space to both and concept, that you can be both. You can think, you can have both this feeling and that feeling about something. You can have this thought and that thought about something. It doesn't mean you're a hypocrite necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
It means that you can hold space for more than one idea and more than one thought, more than one belief system, or more than one, concept. So I guess where I became a little bit turned off from the sex positivity movement is that then that's when all of the transgenderism and all of the non-binary and children are now, wanting to choose their own genders, and now we're getting into this really dangerous place with puberty blockers, and it's all been lumped into what should have been, or I think what started as the sex positivity movement, which was really about consenting adults who enjoy each other's sexuality, and between two people or five people, whatever people, that you're adults and you're in the position to consent because you're emotionally and mentally and spiritually of age to be able to consent to having certain kinds of open relationships or certain kinds of open sexual partners. I don't think there's a problem with that. It's not my particular leaning or my value set, but I don't think there is a problem with it, or porn for that matter. And for those that are just joining, I think I had mentioned I did a whole, project on how I thought porn could be helpful for some relationships, sexual, in the sexual satisfaction arena. That it wasn't something that, you had to watch alone in private and then it became a problem, or you only could have an orgasm if you were watching porn, or you could only have sex if you're watching porn. That wasn't it. It was how to enhance a relationship, a sexual relationship that was already there. Now, I'm not going to speak on my personal life here, but it's not from necessarily personal experience that happened. It was because I wanted to explore this topic in a way that was more open-minded, that there was more open-mindedness about prostitution or about things of that nature, without it being so taboo because it was morally wrong to sell or exchange sex for money. I do not believe it's morally wrong to exchange sex for money. I believe it's morally wrong for children to be trafficked, and women to be trafficked, and men to be trafficked, and anybody to be trafficked against their will, against the age of consent. And I don't even say age of consent, mental and emotional consent. I don't think 18-year-olds can necessarily consent, by the way. And I'm just going to say that now. I don't know that they're mature enough to.
I think that's really interesting. That leads to something really interesting, which is this phenomenon that you see happen over and over, where young women go into sex work of some kind, whether it's stripping or prostitution or pornography, and they will say that they're really happy doing that, and that it feels very liberating, and that there's very gratifying experience. And then when they're older, that same woman will say, it was terrible, I was coerced, it was basically rape, I didn't know what I was doing, I didn't have enough information. Or so there's a real, so at what point is a person able to say that this is something that they're happy to give up? And do you how do you address that?
That's a very good question. And I'm going to just I guess it's not a cop-out answer, but I'm going to say I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it depends on the circumstances upon which somebody decided to go into that business. There is a lot of coercion, there is a lot of control, there is a lot of sleazy, nasty people who are there obviously to exploit and to make money off of somebody else's, body and space and to manipulate. So I don't think that there's a standard answer, but I think the conditions under which somebody chooses to enter a situation like that speak to whether or not they may be ready. And I think I think there's always a potential that you're going to regret it later. And that has to be something that you have to think through before
Are
starting it
and are the
as well.
conditions always, I mean, if the conditions are that you're willing to engage in an intimate sexual behavior that you wouldn't do because you wanted to. I don't desire this person, and I'm not engaging in
Hmm.
this directly because I want to do this thing, but for a third, for
Hmm.
some third reason or some second reason. I want money for this, or I
Hmm.
want reputation for this, or I'm seeking fame, or I'm seeking um I don't know, so, you to
Hmm.
feel some certain way about me. I'm trying to make
Hmm.
myself feel validated and sexy. It's not because I want you, it's because I want the whatever.
Sure.
Is that condition always something that's coercive? Is there a way to engage in sexual behavior with another person for a different reason and it still be an
Hmm.
ethical thing?
Right.
Especially money.
Right. Especially money. No, that's a good question. I mean, I think one of the things that I thought about a lot when I was kind of putting that presentation together, and in general, when the sex positivity movement came out, was that oh my God, I lost my whole train of thought. It'll come back to me here in a second.
The pornography
The
as a
reasons.
relationship aid presentation.
Oh, I
Yeah.
remember something I used to think about a lot is I would think about my girlfriends who would say to me, I just want to marry a wealthy man. I don't really care if he ends up
Mm,
having affairs. I don't care if he ends up, whatever, cheats. All I want is to remain married and I want to be a kept woman, and I want to be taken care of
mhm,
financially.
mhm.
And that means I've got to give it up when I don't
Yeah.
feel like it.
So it's
That
kind
means I
of the
got to do
same.
it.
It's on the same spectrum.
It's on a spectrum, correct?
Mhm, mhm.
Exactly. And that's what I love about having conversations with you, Leslie, because you just kind of get the bigger picture. You can fill in the blanks sometimes, which is just beautiful. It's a beautiful thing that you do. But yes, it's on a spectrum, and so those on a continuum. So those kinds
Yeah.
of things to me felt very similar to somebody also saying, "Well, I'd like to just pay for my school tuition, or I'd like to
Mhm,
pay for whatever I'm going to pay for," and that's what this is about for me. So it's such a personal decision. The problem is the coercion and the exploitation in that particular arena is so great and it's so vast, and this is where that's also happening to the kids that are getting forced and exploited into changing their genders and
mhm.
into, I don't think this age of consent is an age of, it's an arbitrary age we chose because we wanted people to go into the military, right? At 18 years old. It
Right.
had nothing to do with the maturity level. Now they say the brain doesn't stop growing till 20, it was 24. Now they're saying it's 25 or 26.
Mhm,
So the more that things are going forward, the more people are saying that we're not even fully developed in our
mhm,
conscious minds to make those kinds of big decisions until we're way into our 20s. And
mhm.
I was in grad school already at that time,
Well,
so
and there's some things that we'll never be able to consent to. I mean, like you can't. I was going to say, actually, that's funny. I was going to say you can't consent to being murdered, but now they've got assistance in dying. So I guess you
they do
kind of, I
actually.
mean,
That's
maybe we're
actually a good
breaking
point.
down everything. Maybe everything's being broken down. But it seems like there are some things that you consent to certain things.
Yes. I
And
mean, I
and
agree. You
so
can't.
yeah, it's there must be something that there's a backstop on. Like
There's
you
a
can't
backstop
consent
someplace.
to.
I
Yeah.
think, you look at, the people that tend to go into these things, I'm just going to make a statement here. It's probably going to irritate a lot of people, but it's just what I think. And, you know, when you look at people that are in those professions, most of the time they don't have strong male figure attachments that they grew up with. Let's say a father in the home, or a
Okay. Yeah.
mother and
Like in
father in the
sex work.
home
Yeah.
in sex work. A
Yeah.
lot of the time, you see that there's a pull to do that stuff. Yeah, there's money involved, but there's also a validation. There's also maybe a complex, not a complex, it's such an outdated, but there's some kind of attachment issue that these women may have. And again, men do it too. Men go
Hmm.
into the profession as well. But if we're talking about women at this moment, you don't see a whole lot of strong nuclear family core basic values. You don't see a lot of strong um, male attachment figures that these women necessarily had before they chose to kind of go into this. And so I guess my point is, maybe in that circumstance, they can't really consent because they don't have they don't have all of the facts, they don't have all of the background, they don't have all the history. But at the same time, not doing sex work or not being involved in sex work isn't going to change that either. So
That's
it's
interesting.
almost,
Well, it also it seems to speak to like a missing element of identity development, because like
yes,
part of the it's hard to say what's the smallest unit of of a human, of what it means to be human. Is it the individual? Is it the family? Where are we? Because you can't be a human in complete isolation. That's very hard and
correct.
it's very unhealthy. So we're really best conceptualized as some sort of social creature. And if
Yes,
you didn't grow up in a social um in a social context that allowed you a full development of a sense of yourself as a person,
yes,
then you don't really have an anchoring. And so, like you're saying, if you're a young woman or a girl who grows up and you don't have good connections with men, then you don't have a sense of yourself in your father's eyes, for instance. You don't have a sense
bingo.
of like who I am as a full person. And so without that reputation and that relationship to manage, what does it matter what I do with myself? People appreciate me, and this is one way that I'm getting appreciation. I don't have
Yes,
another way that I'm getting appreciation, and so this can
yes,
become outsized, and it's a legitimate aspect of one's identity. Being seen
big
as
time.
something sexual and attractive
Absolutely.
and desirous and desirable and but if you don't have other aspects of yourself that you're trying to manage, then that can become
Yes,
overemphasized.
yes, absolutely. So then it comes down to the question of, if that's the case, is it something, does it warrant the words wrong and right?
Mm,
That's because, does it warrant some sort of a judgment on that behavior? And I don't know if, and again, it's so nuanced, and I don't know if we can answer that, but I don't know if I can answer that, because at the end of the day, I'm not going to be in that person's shoes. And I
yeah.
do know a lot of people who married for money, which I know in certain parts of my life, not directly my core group, but there are
Hmm.
certain extensions of my life that I do know that did that, who are willing to stay in relationships or in marriages that are open on one side, not open on the other necessarily,
Mm,
and feel perfectly justified in that, because at the end of the day, they enjoy the life that they are given, which is the superficiality of it. Well, again,
yeah.
is that my place or my business to say
To say that
that's
that's
something
wrong.
right, to say that
You
that's
know,
wrong?
that's a good point. And it kind of, Paul McAuliffe in the chat says, since we have no clue as to the way our viewpoints change over time, I think it's anything goes as long as no one gets hurt or killed. So-called consenting adults, in my opinion. Those who get older and have regrets just have to live with them. And I think that kind of speaks to this, like,
Yep,
how do you say what's right for another person? And I
yep,
think I think that if you are, if you're, I guess, observing trends, observing social patterns, I think it's possible to say, wow, this kind of behavior looks like it creates healthier societies, or this kind of
yes,
behavior tends to look like it degrades societies. But when you get to the granular individual level, what person has a right to tell another person what they're doing is wrong? It's more a
right,
matter of observing what we think is right and then trying to live that way, and maybe having conversations about it. I think our influence only extends, or should only extend, as far as we can honestly convince other people that they want to think like us. And as an individual,
yes,
at the point of force, you've
Yes.
corrupted something, because then the person nobody's acting according to their honest desires, or they're not living authentically. They're not able to really live a good life if they're only living a certain way because of fear of punishment. So I don't think,
Yes.
I guess when I'm thinking about these things, they're kind of thought experiments about
Mm-hmm.
what I think, like, how do
Mm-hmm.
I define morality?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, if you can define morality for yourself, then you kind of think that everybody, and here I'm trying to steer carefully around these words should, because should, what does that even mean? I
What
I
does that even
I would
mean? I
observe that
agree.
I think that it would be right if everybody did this thing. It's kind of like Kant, the
Yes.
categorical imperative.
Yes.
Is it right? Well, if I think it's right for everybody to do this, then it must be right. Is it
Right.
right? Well, if I think that if everybody did this, something bad would happen, then it's not right. And so that's I guess, a measuring stick. But
I think it's more about, rather than the word right, for me, it's more about wrong. It's more about, is this wrong?
mhm,
And if it's wrong, why is it wrong? Is it wrong because it's for that, it's not right for that person, or it's not right for our community? But I don't think in terms of right as much as I think in terms of wrong. So when I'm saying something isn't wrong, I'm not saying
mhm,
it's right either. And maybe
mhm,
that's kind of a cop out, but that's truly how I feel. If it's not wrong to do a particular, it is wrong to
yeah,
assault someone, coerce someone, use power and control in order to get somebody to bend to your will. Obviously, I think
mhm,
those are just general, I think, moral values that we as a society have to have in place in
yeah,
order to have some kind of healthy connections
mhm,
with each other.
yeah.
So those
That's
things would be wrong.
echoed in the chat. Ash Brown says,
Mhm.
"Isn't it easier to know what is wrong for people than what's right? Some things
Yes,
are just obviously wrong, like physical harm."
yes.
Yeah.
So that's that's where I ended up with the sex positivity movement. Sorry, and
Uh-huh.
those potential acts, is it wrong? And that's, I think, where I started from.
Well, and then just to go into that, Seawolf says people fall through the cracks. Self-harm should be seen as a cry for help. And you know, when is sex work self-harm?
Mm, that's a really good question. When is it self-harm? I mean, there's so much drug use that's connected to it. So I think when, you're folding drugs into it, obviously, then there's a different reason that's being exploited. Clearly, then you have a substance use issue, and you also have this issue, and you're paying for it with that,
Mhm.
etc. Then it gets to be very blurred lines. But I think that there is a natural tendency to think of prostitution as a bunch of young girls that are being controlled by a pimp, and that are all on drugs, and that are all full of STDs. I mean, that's kind of like the generic, kind of stereotypical. Where I knew people, and maybe this is also part of it too, that I was friends with, who were in the sex industry when we were in our 30s. And I wouldn't say that those people particularly did it because they wanted to sleep with everybody they slept with for money,
Mhm.
but the money outweighed the dislike of the job, if I could say that.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. They felt like it
so
was a good exchange.
they felt like it was a good exchange. Now,
Mhm.
I did know somebody who kept it from her partner,
Mm,
and he didn't know. That to me felt wrong, because at that point, you don't have all of the facts. Now you're hiding it. Now it's become something that is
mhm,
interfering, would interfere in your relationship with somebody else. It's and then I had I knew some quite interesting people, because I worked in entertainment. That was my first career. And so I met
mhm,
a lot of people that did a lot of different kinds of things,
mhm.
and people I stayed in touch with over the years. So it was interesting to kind of see how their life choices developed and what they ended up doing. But and then I had another, kind of distant acquaintance whose partner knew about it and was very pro her being out there and
Mm.
earning money. And he kind of sat around all day eating cereal and playing Scrabble. And
Mm.
that was the life so,
That sounds
you
like
know,
codependency. I mean, that
that's
sounds like two
very
people who
much
I'm not gonna tell you that I think what you're doing is wrong because you're not telling me what I'm doing is wrong. And we can
exactly.
allow each other to be, yeah.
And that was hurtful in their relationship quite a bit. So was it harmful? I would say in those In the situation where the partner didn't know, it was harmful. The situation where the partner pushed the person to go do it, I think that was harmful too. Those
Mm-hmm.
two scenarios to me seem that both, parties were, being harmed and harming each other in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
is it wrong? Well, I wouldn't say it was right to do that, but at the same time, if you want to have a polyamorous relationship, I don't agree with polyamory at all. I mean, it's just
Mm-hmm.
not something I agree with. I don't believe in it. I don't agree with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yet I'm sitting here telling you that I don't think that prostitution is always wrong. So the
Well,
polyamory
I
to me
guess
looks a little different.
I would, when I think about morality, there's a lot of things that I would define as that I could comfortably say I think are wrong, but
Mm-hmm.
still don't think of myself as having the right to force that decision on another person. So
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a
Mm-hmm.
difference to be.
Yes.
So I don't feel so. Um, I guess the hesitation around saying something is wrong is that there's this implication that you, I don't know, would judge somebody else for doing it. I think people make a lot
Right.
of complicated decisions for lots of reasons, but if I could,
Yes.
be honest, I would say that certain things seem wrong because when you think about it spread over a society at the society level, if everybody did this action, what would it result in? It would result in something that would
Chaos.
be, yeah, very difficult.
Chaos and perversion. Just I'm thinking about my co-podcaster for CTA, our CTA podcast. Yako uses that word a lot, and it's a very good word to use. But yes, chaos and perversion, a lot of
Yeah.
perversion would
Yeah.
infiltrate. So there has to be some kind of moral fabric or foundational moral principles or roots in the ground. Now, what
Mm-hmm.
are those? Are those do harm to no one? Then we've got that covered. Are they, be a giving person? Are they, are we talking about communities where if we were to live more community focused and barter and exchange
Mm-hmm.
rather than use money, would that be a more, fair society? I mean, I have no idea. I don't think so, in my opinion. But I do believe that we have to have grounded roots in what is right and wrong in order to have a less perverse society.
You
Otherwise,
know,
anything goes. The guardrails are gone. There's no boundaries set, and there's no way to contain behaviors that are going to eventually negatively impact somebody else, if even without specifically targeting them and trying to harm them. They will
yeah,
just by default.
Bill's, yeah. And something that comes up a lot, I think, is this idea of don't do this with children. Don't do X with children. Don't expose children to X. Don't,
Yeah.
like
Yes.
there's this whole idea, we talked about this earlier about the age of consent. And this was something that I wanted to talk. I had this great conversation with Buck Angel and Jennifer Friend,
Hmm.
and we were talking about pornography, and Buck was making these points about not exposing kids to this certain material, that it should absolutely be kept from kids, which I 100% agree with. But
Sure.
then that after you hit a certain age, it's all fine. And I felt like there's something interesting about this, like something is really bad for children, but it's all just fine for adults. Like, is that really true? Is there, and when we
Good
talk about
question.
like the gender issue is a big one,
Yes.
transgender and medical treatments, medical
Yes.
either surgeries and hormonal therapies that people are being given in order to look like the
Yes.
opposite sex. And so there are people who seem to be very happy with their decision that they made as an adult
Yes.
to live life presenting as the opposite sex and to have these therapies and these treatments. They seem
Yes.
very happy with it. They say that they're very happy with it. I have to believe what somebody is saying. Who am I to second guess someone's
Sure.
own testimony? But I can't help but wonder, the same as I wonder with these young women. Like there's this one really like popular online prostitute who she collects data and she talks about it in a really intellectual way. And she's like, I don't, I've seen these posts, and she'll have she's bragging about how many sexual partners she has, how she does multiple partners, how she is seeing lots and lots of clients for sex work, and how she's really happy in this lifestyle and really supportive of other women taking on this lifestyle. And I, you know again, it's like a person who's telling you she's saying this is true for me.
Yes.
So I'm torn between like, okay, I believe what you say about yourself. And are you really happy with that? Is there some level on
Right.
which you're kind of deluding yourself? And I
Right.
don't know. But who am I to say that for someone else? But still, I guess there's these areas of life where people really, they've done something kind of extreme. Is it fair to say that once you're 18, or once you're of, even if 26, like what we determined, 32, whatever you determine, some age
Right.
of consent is no holds barred, and there's no moral backdrop to whatever you want to do, just do whatever. But when you're a
Right.
kid, live this like little purity bubble, perfect childhood
Right.
innocence lifestyle. So I guess I'm not sure what the question is. I'm not sure how to formulate this, but do you understand what I'm saying? It's like
Oh, I
adult
get it.
morality, nah,
Yes.
whatever.
It
Kid
doesn't.
morality, ooh, perfect.
Right.
No.
Yes. No, I think I agree. I would venture to say, and now I'm going to sound like a hypocrite, but I also believe this is true. And again, as I said earlier, we have to be able to live with the both and. I mean, we just
Yeah.
have to kind of be able to live with that to some extent. But I also don't believe necessarily that somebody that is out there displaying to the world and trying to kind of justify overly so that she's so happy and I just want to brag about this. To me, that would be the case in any kind of scenario. I think if you need to get that external, you're still searching for external validation, which means how happy are you really doing this? Are you really
Mm-hmm.
doing this because you feel good about giving your body on loan to other people, and this is that fulfills you? Or are you trying to kind of overcompensate by going this opposite direction and overly loving it? Although if we really kind of pour down some of those barriers, would you actually be happy doing it? I don't know if that makes sense. I don't I think that when people are parading around publicly to for a show, I mean for a show of support, or for some kind of validation
Mm-hmm.
from the external world, that makes me question whether or not they feel good about what it is they're doing. That's what I have to say.
Okay. Yeah, that's
That to
interesting.
me, that needs to be something that is private within the contents of your own home and your own
But
life.
why that, and why not some other topic? Like you and I are we're
Right.
publicly having conversations about
Yeah.
psychology, about ethics, and about all kinds of things. So why is that a different topic? Why is sex
That's a
so
good
different?
question. I That's a good question. And I think it's because there's still a lot of shame around sex.
Is it
And
because
maybe
of
that
shame, or is it because it's somehow sacred?
both.
Yeah.
I would say both. I would say there's shame involved still. People still carry shame around sex. And maybe that comment that I made sounds like I have shame around it. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. I don't think I
Mm-hmm.
do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there is something about it that's also very sacred. But I also think marriage is sacred. I think going and sharing vows and getting married is sacred. Not a lot of people necessarily hold that particular set of values or that belief system to be very sacred,
Mm-hmm.
that marriage is a piece of paper. But to me, it means something more than that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of it too is, what is the meaning that I attach around these particular behaviors, or the meaning that I attach to sex, the meaning that I attach to marriage, the
Mm-hmm.
meaning that I attach to the kind of work I do. I find therapy to be very sacred. And I
Mm-hmm.
find psychology and all of these things that we do to be very sacred. But you're right. Why are we able to talk about this so freely? But then the whole sex thing comes up and it's okay, well, don't let your, because at the end of the day, I would not want to see my child make a choice to become a prostitute.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that might sound very hypocritical because I just spent all this time saying that doesn't mean it's wrong, but it means I don't think I would want to see my
You
child
know,
making that decision.
I think that that's another way to apply something like the categorical imperative. And it's something that I've used over and over in my own life. Like, should I do this thing? Well, would I want my daughter to do this?
Yes.
And at one point it was about my divorce from my first husband. Would I want my child to be in this marriage?
Right.
And when I could say, honestly, no, I wouldn't want that for her. Well, then I don't
Hmm.
want it for myself. And so I think that that's a useful way to measure morality for some
For some.
Ash Brown in the chat says, you're talking about a legal framework. Technically, at a certain age, we are adults and so free to make our own choices. And so I'm not, though. I really don't. I really think law is best left out of a lot of these messy personal decisions. I really don't think legality. I think that's the very last resort for any kind of free society. I think laws should be used very, very sparingly, especially around complex social decisions. So in terms of like, there was the girl who just did it. I just listened to an episode of Trigonometry with this woman was talking about, should porn be illegal? Or be banned?
Yeah.
And I agreed with a lot of the things she said, and I disagreed with some of the things she said. And she kind of lost me at make it illegal, because that's really, really difficult. And I just don't really, maybe it's my own personal bias, but I think that people are best left to come to their own moral decisions about a lot of things. And even though I have a strong sense of moral code and principle, and I think it would be great if other people did as well, I don't see it as my place to force somebody else to do that. And that's what law is. Law is the point of a gun. Law is, is force.
Yes. And I think there's a difference between the words illegal and decriminalized. I think that prostitution, for example, should be decriminalized among consent, meaning the law shouldn't necessarily be involved in that. Unless, of course, it's, children. And here we go. We're back to that conversation about what age is even the age of consent. But I think decriminalizing something it takes the law out of it altogether. So law,
how is law best I went to law school, and some of these issues came up where, for instance, there was an abortion question. It wasn't about abortion, it was about is it infanticide to kill a woman who's pregnant? Did you also kill the baby? Can you legally be held for 2 homicides, or is it just 1 homicide? And then you read these really complex opinions written by justices on these issues, and you see how difficult it is to really manage people, because people's individual experiences are so unique and they're so complicated. And if you start making laws, you have to be really careful about how you implement laws, because you sometimes are looking at things too in sort of a unilateral or tunnel vision kind of way. It's kind of like with the COVID stuff, when we saw people were like, okay, shut down your business. Okay, what? Like, what does that mean for certain people? It just, you've applied one metric, and you made one rule for everybody that affects people in so many different ways. And so I just, that I guess my legal training and my social experience would lead me to say that law should be implemented very carefully. And I maybe laws about how institutions can do certain things make more sense than laws about how individuals can do certain things. So thinking about abortion, like the Planned Parenthood thing, where they're actually selling baby or aborted baby parts, and so they're incentivized to like do these kind of abortions that leave the baby alive, because if the baby's still alive, that they can utilize certain pieces and do certain things. And you start to get into something that seems really, really perverse. Nightmarish. Like, if this being has no rights at all, then it's just scientific tissue to be harvested. And if you have an institution that's incentivized to do so, well, then there's a lot of room for corruption, versus an individual who's making I don't know. So we could get.
But you're totally right. I mean, with regards to that, the institutionalization of law versus laws that are on people's personal choice or free. I do agree with that. I think that that's where more needs to be focused. Because Planned Parenthood, I didn't know that till you just said that right now, about them kind of having incentives to actually sell the tissue. I actually,
there's a big industry in selling the tissue.
I had no idea. So I'm just horrified. So I'm sitting here trying to let that sink in for a minute and process that.
I'm sorry. But no, I'm not an expert on this, but some of the things I've read and seen are really shocking around this. So it's, And I guess without much more information, I shouldn't really be introducing stuff like that, but it'd be something I'd be interested in
Oh,
exploring maybe at some point.
definitely. I have problems with Planned Parenthood for a lot of reasons too, and I do think that they're
They're
pro. I
doing the
don't.
gender stuff too. They're really helping
They're
kids with
pushing that.
gender.
It's disgusting actually, and
Mhm.
so the fact that they're doing this on top of that just makes me even more very turned away and turned off by what Planned Parenthood's doing. It isn't Planned Parenthood. They're not helping you with family planning and helping you figure out there's a real motivation and agenda that's driven at Planned
Yeah,
Parenthood.
there's
That's
this
where I
guy
had a
who does
problem.
there's a guy who does these really fantastic like documentary style research pieces.
Hmm.
And it's he puts them on YouTube and they're really well done. These videos are super well done. And he did one on this where he goes into he shows you these founding documents. He plays clips of these people doing it. He did one on he called it the population, the birth of control. I think
Oh,
his
interesting.
yeah, his YouTube channel is Everybody Shook.
Uh-huh.
I'll if I remember, I'll put a link in the thing.
Uh-huh.
But I want to talk to the Solid Ground
Yes.
girls about this. I want us to do one on his work on that last video because I thought it was really interesting. Some of the ways he demonstrated, like when they were coming up with the idea of birth control, they really had roundtables about how to market this to people. How do we
Yes.
talk about this? And at one point they were calling it race control because it really was about eugenics and controlling certain parts of the population, which
Yes.
was real. It's really interesting. It's an interesting history. But if I can segue kind of
Yes.
between that and the original topic that we talked about, or that we've been talking about today, I had asked the Solid Ground, Jennifer and
Hmm.
Deborah, if they wanted to have this one particular discussion. I'm
Hmm.
reading this book called Your Brain on Porn.
Hmm.
The author is Gary Wilson,
Hmm.
and it's so good. It's so informative and so
Hmm.
interesting. And he really goes into research on
Hmm.
how pornography impacts the brain and users. And
Hmm.
I just was finding it so fascinating. So I introduced it to them and I said, would you guys like to talk about this? Are you willing to read this also so we can have a discussion around
Hmm.
it? And we were saying we should see if we can get the author on to have to bring him onto Solid Ground so we can have a discussion. So I reached out to through the website, and it's called Your Brain on Porn. It's often abbreviated YBOP, which is kind of,
Hmm.
I don't know, whatever, kind of cutesy acronym. And I filled out this form and I got a response really quickly. And this is what I sent to you was the
Yes.
response.
Yes.
And they said he actually passed away a couple of years ago. And then they
Yes.
sent all of this information about how he had been, and they said, nobody will talk. I said, is
Yes.
there anybody else from your organization that would like to talk? And they said, the smear campaign against this guy, the porn and people representing the porn industry actually went into the Wayback Machine and changed internet archives to create to create basically like character assassination and reputational damage against
Hmm.
this guy. And there was such a concerted attack against him that nobody
Hmm.
is willing to talk about these things
Hmm.
because there's there's such suppressive tactics. I thought that sounds very spy versus spy. It sounds very,
Yes.
kind of, it's very intriguing. I don't
Yes.
know what to think about that, but I sent you the email.
Yes, yes. And I looked at some of the articles. I didn't check out the Wikipedia. I have sort of a, love-hate relationship with them because they have
Yeah.
gone back and done that with a lot of different current events. They've done that with a lot of people where they've gone
Hmm.
back and rewritten or changed or used.
Well, can't
It's not
anybody edit it or is some,
anybody. Yeah,
yeah.
yes, you can, there's some way to get on permission to do it, but pretty
Yeah.
much anybody. And so I don't
So
care
you
for
can
them
use it, you can
anymore.
do it to present biased information.
Yes, you can
Yeah.
do it to present biased information. So you're not getting just, truth and fact or
Hmm.
whatever. You're not getting
Hmm.
facts or evidence like you would in a encyclopedia. Anyway,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, I find that very fascinating. I don't know why he, with all of the hot button issues that are out there, why he would be targeted to that level
Hmm.
and to that extreme place, at the extremity of that. Why? That's my question.
I
It
know.
is, I don't know, out of all the different, things and chaotic things we have going on, all the different issues, why is that such a hot button issue that somebody who's presenting their, material, their
Hmm.
opinion and their content is getting attacked in that fashion? Is porn that important?
Well, here Gorilla Radio says, question, who owns Pornhub, and ask why it's free. Well,
Ah,
that's interesting. John Ronson has done a couple of things on this. The Butterfly Effect was really good.
yes,
Did you ever
yes.
listen to that? It's so good.
I didn't, but I heard,
Oh,
and I should go and
it
listen.
goes into that.
And several
Yeah.
people have recommended it to me.
Yeah, the more I learn about this issue, the more interested I am in it. And it does seem like when you were saying that you did a project in graduate school, for anybody who's just missed that part, about how couples can use porn to enhance their relationship. So in a looking at it as a potential helper.
Hmm.
One of the things that in Your Brain on Porn, the author talks about, he goes into studies on supernormal stimuli,
Yeah.
which is like the examples in the animal kingdom. He talked about studies where they've presented a bird with an egg that's prettier than their own egg, like it's
Hmm.
shinier and
Hmm.
maybe larger or something like that. And the
Hmm.
bird will sit on that egg and let their own eggs die. The bird will be more attracted to
Mm.
that thing than the thing that would actually be
Hmm.
biologically beneficial to that bird. And then they talked about a beetle study where the beetles actually, instead of mating with each other, they just fell in love with these bottle
Yes.
bottoms, or something like these round, these brown shiny bottle things. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
looks like it looks like the thing that you're biologically supposed to be attracted to, but
Yeah.
it it looks so, it's like an enhanced version, so you end up
Yes.
foregoing the real thing for this thing. And he talks about how porn is a supernormal stimulus,
Yes.
because, and I think one of the points that he's making in this Your Brain on Porn that I've made before, but he backs it up with a lot of research, which is really
Yes.
great, is how internet streaming porn is so very different from the porn that we would have had before,
Yes.
because it presents a constant available flow of new imagery, and
Yes.
you can continue to escalate in terms of people they become sensitized to the level of imagery that they're seeing, and then they want to see more intense things, they want to evoke more intense feelings, so you can end up sort of perpetually going to more and more, versus if you had a Playboy, or
Right.
or even like something more hardcore than that, you are going to exhaust what you've got in that
Right.
magazine. Or if you have a video that you checked out from a store, or even if you have a
Right.
pile of videos, you couldn't really recreate that same experience through those
Right.
things. So it created a much more intense
Right.
experience that offers more opportunity for addictive and compulsive behavior.
Yeah. And I think that's fascinating. Makes a lot of sense. Sorry, I'm just plugging in my computer here so it doesn't die on us.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's fascinating. I think that's there's a lot of good points there, because I remember that in this paper that I did, I was very careful to even, and again, this is 20 years ago. Would I write a paper like this now or talk about it this way now? I don't think so. But I did understand back then the dangers of the porn addiction issue. And so I was very careful to say that you know, if you're finding that the only way you're able to have sex with your partner and have it be a fulfilled experience or meaningful experience or pleasurable experience is through having to watch porn in order to achieve that with your partner
Mhm.
together, then that
Mhm.
was problematic. And that to me was where it became what you're talking about. Let me sit on the shiny eggs and let my own
Yeah.
eggs die,
Yeah.
and let me go and, et cetera.
Hmm.
Those analogies that were given from research that was done.
Hmm.
So I think that all of these things come with these caveats, and they come with exceptions, and they come with, you know, um, multi-layered, they're multi-layered components. And I think the
Hmm.
problem with the black and the white thinking it goes back to missing the nuance. And I think that's where the issue is in a lot of these kinds of conversations. It's there's so much nuance in, I think, all of this stuff that it's very hard to be very extreme about it. But like I said, I don't think I would write a paper like that today, because we didn't have the internet back then. We did have the internet, but there wasn't a lot of internet porn back then. I actually checked out the tapes from the book, or
Oh
not the
yeah, it was a
bookstore, but the
different
video.
kind of,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was a whole
Yeah.
different type of thing.
Well, that's really interesting. And I think it's really admirable that you have that kind of open perspective on this. And it was, like you said, it was a different playing field then.
Yes.
Mike Hart in the chat says, porn is weird if you think about it. You're literally watching other people have sex. In any other scenario, you'd be considered a creep. And I think that, that's a good point. And that's one of the things that the research shows, is that people actually bond to the act that they're engaging in. And when you're engaging with porn, you're engaging with voyeurism.
Yes.
And so it makes it easier to be a voyeur than to be a real partner.
Yes.
It makes you, it literally rewires your brain to want to be a porn watcher, not a person engaging with a partner.
Yes. And that was a part of the when it becomes a problem section that I had added or wrote about as well. And it's not to say that, I'm trying to really overly defend my position one way or the other, but it's really about, and it's like I said before, I think that there's a lot of color and grays to a lot of things. And maybe there needs to be a more black and white, viewpoint on these kinds of topics. Like I don't know. But I think also, as a therapist, you also hear a lot of things about a lot of different lifestyles, and you're also involved in a lot of people's lives in a very intimate fashion. And part of that means being able to suspend your own, I guess, your own moral, your own rights and wrongs in order to be able to not judge.
Yeah, you can't be in a position of judging.
Unbiasedly, correct. And that's, I think, where that comes into play too, is that, here we are, two people, you're working as a coach now. I've been a therapist for a long time. And I think that, you have this intimate look into somebody else's life and into their worldview. And without an openness, or without being able to suspend your own personal belief system for a bit, it's impossible to find rapport and trust and connection with the person in front of you. And so I think that's another aspect of why maybe I tend to have a bit more open-ended, viewpoints. But one thing I'm not open-ended about at all is the transgender issue. I'm absolutely not. I have a bookend right there. That one for me is black and white.
Palm on Ground says, you're not there to validate, you're there to help them deal with the problems they came with. And I think that's absolutely right. You're not there to judge whether they're doing right or wrong. So you're not there to say yes, unless it is, maybe there are times when that needs to be said, but that's not you're not the moral, you're not the guru, that's telling somebody that they're right or wrong. But the gender thing is really tricky, because it's, for an adult, or even there's so many layers of it. So there's like, what is the person feeling? And if they're telling you what they're feeling, how can you tell them that that's not what they're feeling?
Right.
And, but in terms of the way I usually present it is like, well, my bias is that it's, especially for young people who haven't known what it's like to live in a mature body.
Yes.
That you would suspend any kind of decisions, that you would try to learn to accept the body that you're in.
Yes.
And don't make any kind of decisions or take on any kind of treatments that are going to alter your body permanently before you have a chance to know what it's like to live in an adult body. But you have to do it with caring and with understanding for what the person is saying to you, because they're saying to you that they're really hurting, that they're really they want something so bad. And so how can you just come out the gate and tell them that they're wrong?
Right.
You just you have to be gentle.
You do. And it's why I don't work with that population, because I think my bias is so strong,
Mm-hmm.
and I will admit that it's so strong
Mm-hmm.
that I can't suspend that part
Mm-hmm.
of me in order to work with somebody for the issues that they came in when gender, if that's going to be the issue, or if the issue
Mm-hmm.
is, gender dysphoria. That
I
is
think
where
my
I'm
bias is really strong on that as well. And I know that you catch more flies with honey. And so if you just tell
right.
somebody, if you are, I guess if I'm too opinionated, I'm going to cut off the rapport.
Yes.
And so it's more about delicately listening
Yes.
and understanding the way that it feels to be somebody else, trying to hear somebody else describe what it feels like to be them, but then coming back to that, like, well, and yet,
Right.
you know
Right.
how so many things you want now you won't want later, or you have things you wanted before so
Yes.
there's this way of like delay that, let yourself have time.
Yes.
And it's kind of I don't know, this is such a big topic to like brush over it in this little
Right. And just a
little
couple
moment.
of,
It's really hard to do.
yeah, but no, I think that's what we used to do. I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
used to, before it became all about affirmative care,
Mm-hmm.
and it was more about exploratory care. We had kids that would come in that would say, um, I'm a girl, I was born a girl, but I really feel like I'm a boy. And what we did is a lot of
Mm-hmm.
exploratory work. You have your whole life to live as a
Mm-hmm.
boy, you
Mm-hmm.
have your whole life to make that decision. Let's give yourself a chance to
Mm-hmm.
live for a while in the body that you were born into, type of
Mm-hmm.
thing,
Mm-hmm.
similar to what you were saying. And
Yeah.
it was very gentle, and it was very delicate. It was very
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
effective as well. And we'd start to get the kids, they'd stop talking about wanting to get the puberty blockers, and they'd start
Mm-hmm.
talking about the other stuff that's really going
Yeah, yeah.
on
And that's
that
what
was
you end
very
up doing. You end up
upsetting.
hearing about all kinds of other
Yeah.
stuff, and most of the conversation doesn't even end up on gender,
Yeah.
because gender's like
Yeah.
a final, I don't know, it's often just a
Right.
symptom of something else that's going on, a way to express the thing.
Yes.
And uh let's see, Ash Brown says you have to be gentle but also firm. Tell them they need to know, and to know that it's totally okay. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've said is
Hmm.
that the surgeries right now, the treatments are really uh sort of what I guess barbaric is one word for it, but they're not,
Yeah.
that the medical technology is not advanced enough to be able to guarantee you what you think you want. It's,
Yes.
these people, we talk about the outcomes for people, even people who are happy with their decision are often unhappy with the physical and medical consequences that they have as a result of those decisions. And so it's more reason to just wait. Just see
That's
if you
very
can
true.
see, is there a way to be comfortable in your skin? And
Yep.
if not, I mean, if you become a full-blown adult and you're full grown, you know what it's like to be in your body and you want to make certain decisions, then who am I to judge that?
Right.
I'd be supportive of that. If that, I mean, in
Right.
as much as I'm supportive of any, just like if you want to get a nose job, you want to get a boob job, what do you want to do? I
Right.
mean, I'm not here to validate you, but I will walk with you through it
Right.
if that's a decision you're making as an adult with the full capacity to say that this is something that you want. Even if I think that it's just like you said, you're not a fan of polyamory, but if you have a client who's doing that, what are you going to do? You can't impose your views on that person.
No. Yeah, no. I just know it's not something that's right for me, and it's not something that I feel is
Mm-hmm.
the the best, way to be in an intimate relationship. But that has to be suspended if I'm going to walk down that road with somebody. And that's where I have to know my
Mm-hmm.
limitations as a
Mm-hmm.
practicing therapist. Where am I limited in what I can and can't take on, and
Mm-hmm.
the clients that I do and don't see, and for what reasons?
Mm-hmm.
Because it used to be, this whole idea that, oh, well, we're trying to train therapists so that they don't see Trump supporters. That to
Mm-hmm.
me is, uh, I mean, I can't, it's so ridiculous that I don't even have the words for how ridiculous that is. I mean, that's a totally different, kind of ballpark there in insanity. than saying, I tend to have very strong beliefs about, sexually moral and immoral behaviors or perversions.
Mhm.
And I can't sit and support somebody who has perversions that lead to the downgrade of society. And people call Trump supporters, I guess, deranged and perverse, but that's an incorrect use of those terminology. So
Mhm.
I don't think
Mhm.
it can even be in the same boat.
Mhm.
So that's where, as a therapist, it's not just about I can't be with uncomfortable things or I can't sit with uncomfortable topics. You have to really not
Yeah.
be able to divorce yourself from it while you're in that session in
Well,
order for it
yeah.
to be
And
bad.
if you're not the kind of person that can really be open to hearing something, then why would
Yes,
anybody want to talk to you?
yes, bingo. I mean,
Mhm.
that's absolutely.
Mhm.
So I haven't broached the gender, clients much because I do feel that I don't want to be in a situation where I become more frustrated myself
Mm.
because I'm too ingratiated in how I
Yeah.
feel about it,
Yeah. Yeah.
that I
You
upset
have
myself and
you
I'm no
sense a
person.
rigidity in yourself
I
around
felt,
that, and you
yeah,
don't want
I
to
do.
be. Yeah.
I do. And I
Yeah.
don't, and that's not fair. It's not fair to that
Yeah.
person. It's not fair to
Yeah.
the work,
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah,
um,
well, I think that's really wise to kind of be aware of where you stand on something, and if you feel
mhm,
like it would be a barrier to being open to hearing.
yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I've worked with DV, perpetrators. I've worked with people that were, you know, sexual assault perpetrators. Those are
Mhm.
the groups of people that you used to hear in grad school nobody wants to work with and they can't work with them. It's very hard to
Right.
work with them. I've been able to do that, but this one issue though I can't. That's
This
where my
one. Yeah.
right. And we all
Yeah.
have an issue that we can't seem to work past or that we
Yeah.
might be too rigid on.
Yeah.
This is
It's
it for me.
this one. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's not the others,
Yeah.
regardless of how I feel about them. So it's interesting, but it's given me a lot to think about our conversation, quite
Yeah.
frankly.
Well, a guy in his room says, "Is it a bias or just Christine having a conscience?"
Oh,
That's
well, thank
interesting.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah,
know.
maybe it's both.
It is interesting. I think it's
Yeah.
hard to I think that there's a place. I've thought about this. I thought about this in terms of the discussion around sexual morality,
Yes.
where I just recently found the download of the human sexuality textbook that I used in
Uh-huh.
graduate school,
Yes.
and was thinking back on that class and how I felt really uncomfortable with a lot of it, because
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like it's telling you, here's a giant question, like how it- for instance, the teacher, I know I've talked to you about this before, but the teacher was describing a client of hers that does scat porn.
Hmm.
When he told her that, and I'd never heard of those words together before. I mean, I
What is
understand
that?
it must be something to do with going like defecating
Oh, oh,
in
oh, oh,
order for
yes.
people to get
Yes.
erotic excitement. I mean,
Yes.
that's what I put together when I hear that phrase, but I had never heard that phrase
Yes.
before. And the teacher is telling us this, and she's telling us um just so that we would hear a description of a time that you had to keep a straight face with a client. That's what this was for her. It was, sometimes it'll be hard to keep a straight face. And she's
Oh my
talking about this
gosh.
client telling her this, and that how much she wanted to laugh. And
Oh
I
my
was like,
gosh.
I feel really disconnected from what you're telling me right now. Like
Right.
I'm so you're saying like, oh, it's totally fine that he does that and that's a healthy thing, and the unhealthy thing is my amusement at this. And I'm also like,
Mm,
how are you amused? I
mm.
would be really, this would raise so many
I'm
questions, and it would,
disturbed.
my mind would be going in a lot of different places right now, like, okay, so how does the client feel about this? What does this mean for the
Yes.
client? What does this represent? Why are you allowing yourself to be seen this way? What does it mean for you as a person, and where does it come
Yes.
from that you're comfortable with this? And yet underlying that is like this implied foundation that I think that this is a a wrong thing for you, right? So I've got in the room is my sexual morality.
Right.
And if I have no sexual morality, if I have no foundation for like a what's considered healthy, then I'm like the teacher where it's just like, haha, that's so funny. He does this thing. And and that felt kind of like almost sociopathic to me.
Sure.
And yet, aren't we supposed to be somewhat unbiased around things? So like
Yes.
when is therapy too unbiased?
Ah,
And I tend to be a really non-judgmental person. Like I really honestly am. I have a pretty strong moral framework, but people,
sure.
I can hear all kinds of things and
Yes.
I don't turn a person, I'm not turning on someone. I'm more curious, like, because I kind of feel like if morality is in any way objective, if there's any such thing as anything that approaches objectivity, then it's something that we can all find within ourselves
Sure.
if we are introspective, healthy, and allow ourselves to do the exploration. So it's not something that I need to bring in, it's something that'll come out,
Sure.
and it's within the the other person. But there was so much about the sexuality education that I got that felt like not only are you um accepting of all kinds of behavior, but you're actually kind of promoting it as healthy.
Yes.
You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yes. Yes. I have a hard time with that
Look,
as
it's
well.
97 cents. Leslie just has to stop being such a prude and express humility at other people's life choices. Is that, I don't know if that's supposed to be funny or if that's just true. I don't think I'm being a prude.
I
I
don't
think
think you're a
that
prude at
that's,
all.
yeah.
I mean, it's disturbing to me that the professor, was needing, was needing to hold back laughs. I mean, that to me is what probably the most disturbing thing of that whole scenario is that
Mm-hmm.
the professor felt like they were going to laugh, that
Yeah.
this wasn't something that was
Mm-hmm.
obviously serious and needed to be looked at in some
Mm-hmm.
way, and whether you agree with it or don't, or think it's perverse or not, or whatever in between, the fact that that was used as an example of when you want to laugh at a client. Um, I don't think I've ever, in any of the classes I've ever taught, I don't think I've ever used an example of when I've wanted to burst out laughing. So I don't think I've ever
Yeah.
felt that way with a
Yeah.
client. I mean,
No,
that in and of itself
I've
was just
never felt that way. How are you've lost your connection completely? You're just
absolutely,
observing them for amusement now. You're not
yes,
really with them in what they're saying to you. You want to laugh at
yes,
them.
you're
I
not in
that
it.
was really strange. And
Absolutely.
I see like people are telling me that there's the backslash s means sarcasm. Sorry, 97 cents. Yeah, no worries. I'm not very internet lingo savvy.
I'm
I'm
not either.
I'm of a certain age. I know
Me too.
and I haven't been on computers that much. Well, I have actually.
Yes.
I have. I've been on them an awful lot. I've just really resisted some of the
Yes.
like, but
Well,
thank
I
you.
don't have any social media other than I think my LinkedIn page. It's as far as I go with social media. So
Yeah.
I'm very disconnected. But yeah, that's such an odd thing to laugh at.
Yeah, it is. Well, I think that yeah, it's common ground. We don't tell clients what to think about their choices. We help them explore what it means. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
right. That's
Exactly.
right.
And yet, I guess here's the question that I was asking myself in that is like if I have a sense that I know that I feel like something is really concerning, what can I base that on in terms of sexual morality with the way that we're being taught about sex and the sex positivity and all sex
Yes.
work is just about consent. And so at what point is there how do I base the concern that I feel when I hear that on what am I basing that on? So I guess that's the
Right.
question. I think
That
I
is the question.
that's a you know if it's not from my own sense of morality, what does it come from? And then you end up in a whole field of subjectivity. And
Yes.
I feel like there's something messy in there and I don't really know how to articulate it.
It is messy. And I don't know, I don't know how to wrap my mind around it either. I do think it's very messy because as much as we suspend our own beliefs, we still have to have some kind of moral grounding when we have clients as well.
Mm.
There has to be something that grounds the sessions and that grounds the client and that grounds the space that you have with the client. So there has to be some morality that does peek in. And I don't know if that's based on mutual respect, mutual understanding, mutual, valuing this person as much as, I value another person in their life. I don't know if it's based on more of those kinds of virtuous value systems than it is on morality of what's right and what's wrong. I don't know.
Well, Christine, I feel like I could talk to you all day, but I guess we should probably wrap up. That the conversation around your brain on porn, I want to have that conversation. We're going to do it with solid ground.
That's great.
We were talking about wanting to see if we could get a male perspective. I don't know if maybe Yako would be interested. Maybe I'll reach out to Yako and see if he wants to read it. Or Aaron Kinsfater. I saw Aaron in the chat earlier. I don't know if you're still listening, Aaron, but maybe you'd be interested. I'd like to get another person to read this book and interact with us engage with the material. And also just on like an admin note, I was not sure if I was going to keep doing this YouTube channel after I was like, well, maybe I'll just do it for a year. And now it's over a year and we're still going. And I'm still finding that there's a lot, I have mixed feelings about all of these public, having public conversations, but I still find it very gratifying. It's been good work. I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed connecting with you, and I've enjoyed connecting with the other people that I get to connect with. And it seems like people are enjoying it. So if you are enjoying it, YouTube's not really promoting my stuff anymore. Like for a while, it was getting promoted. Like if you look at the analytics, YouTube would be sending out recommending my videos, and so they were getting a lot of watches, and they stopped doing that. The analytics show a big dip in YouTube recommending it, so now it's like just subscribers are maybe seeing it, or it's sluggish. So there's been a fall off. So if you guys, I think liking the videos is good. That helps to get them out there. So if you want to go around liking them and making comments, that's helpful. And I just, if you enjoy it, pass it along.
Absolutely.
Let's see, somebody says, a guy in his room says, what book is it? It's called Your Brain on Porn. It's by Gary Wilson. And so we'll talk about it again. Maybe we'll do like a preliminary. I'm listening to it on audiobook right now, but I want to order a copy so I can mark it up, because I feel like there's a lot to highlight in there. So I think it would be a good one to have like a larger discussion. Maybe we could even do a series on it.
I think
see what people
awesome.
think. Yeah,
that's awesome. I do want to read it just for my own knowledge, and it sounds very interesting.
Well, you could join us if you want.
I would love to.
Okay, great.
I would love to. Just let me know.
That'd be awesome. We'll do like a solid ground book review or something.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah,
okay.
I'll get the book. That's perfect.
Awesome. Well, anything you're doing right now that you want to say a word about?
Not too much, actually. It's a very quiet period in my life, personally and professionally, for a number of reasons. So I am just, not too much. CTA has actually taken up quite a bit of my my time recently, because we're expanding and running new peer consultation groups, and we're just trying to widen the network. So I've spent a little bit more time with them and our podcast. We stopped recording for a while, Yako and I, but we're starting to record again. We just recorded this weekend. We're going to record again this weekend, and we have a series that's going to come up that I would actually love to promote, and it's going to be on the parents of the kids who want to transition. It's going to be about the perspective of the parents and what they've kind of suffered through or dealt with.
Oh, good. That's so important. That's really important.
Yeah, a huge bunch of them are excited and interested, and it's going to be really different from the tone of the podcast we've done before, which were a little bit more clinical sounding. This is going to be a lot more person and therapeutic sounding. And so I'll let you know when those go up. It's probably March, so we've got a while.
Oh, good. I'm excited. Thank you for sharing that. I'm really excited to see that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Christine, for doing this with me. It's nice to talk with you.
My pleasure. You too.
All right. Thanks to everybody who joined.